He had always dreamed of owning a piece of land where he could breathe freely and escape the chaos of city life. After years of saving, searching, and finally taking the leap, he bought a ranch far out in the countryside. The land was wide open and quiet, with rolling hills and a small creek running through it. It was exactly what he had hoped, for privacy, peace, and a chance to live on his own terms. He imagined mornings with the sun rising over the fields, the soft sounds of animals stirring, and evenings spent on the porch watching the sky turn gold and pink. He felt like he had found his place in the world. In the beginning, everything seemed perfect. The ranch had been neglected for a while, so there was work to do. He repaired fences, cleared brush, and brought in some animals. Life was simple and fulfilling. Every day he woke up early, worked with purpose, and ended the day tired but satisfied. It was the kind of life that people read about but rarely experience. For the first time in years, he felt truly free. Then came the first notice. It arrived in a plain envelope with official-looking letters and stamps. At first, he didn't pay much attention, thinking it was just some minor complaint or routine inspection. But as he read it carefully, a chill ran down his spine. The notice was from a local homeowners association, something he had never expected to affect him. The HOA claimed that the access road to his ranch was part of their community and that he needed to follow certain rules. Rules that didn't make sense to him. Rules that felt like they were designed to control his life. He looked out over his land, the fence posts he had just set, the animals grazing peacefully, and the sun setting over the horizon. How could someone tell him he wasn't allowed to live this way? He reread the letter, noting the threats of fines and legal action. It mentioned community standards, visual guidelines, and livestock restrictions. None of it had any legal weight on land he owned, but the words were heavy. They planted a seed of worry. What if they tried to enforce this? What if someone else bought into their claims? The thought made his stomach churn. He wasn't the type to back down easily. Years of dealing with bureaucracies and people who wanted to control him had taught him patience and strategy. But the first few weeks were tense. He noticed neighbors avoiding him, casting nervous glances when he worked on the land. Rumors spread that the HOA was strict, that they fined people immediately, and that they could make life difficult for anyone who didn't comply. Even the local delivery drivers seemed cautious, as if entering his ranch might cause problems for them. For the first time, the freedom he had fought so hard to achieve felt threatened. Despite the anxiety, he focused on the ranch itself. He built a small barn, fixed the broken fencing along the creek, and introduced a few chickens and goats. Each evening, he sat on the porch, listening to the wind in the trees and the faint sounds of animals settling for the night. He reminded himself that the land was his, that the paperwork and the law were on his side, and that no one could truly take that away. But the notices kept coming. Emails, letters, and even a few phone calls started to arrive regularly. They were polite enough on the surface but carried a tone of authority, as if they assumed he would obey. One morning, the tension reached a new level. He went to check the main gate, which led to the county road, and found a bright orange sign posted with an official seal. The words read something like, "Private access restricted. HOA members only." His heart sank. Someone had placed this sign without his permission right on the road that led into his own property. He knew immediately that it was more than a simple warning. It was a challenge, a direct attempt to block him from entering his own ranch. He walked to the gate and examined the sign carefully. It looked professional, like it had been made by the HOA's office. It even had a small note attached. Failure to comply could result in fines and legal action. He felt a surge of anger. But he also felt something else. Clarity. This wasn't just a minor inconvenience. This was the first move in what could become a much larger battle. He realized that reacting impulsively could make things worse. If he confronted the HOA in anger, they might try to escalate. If he ignored them, they might assume compliance. He needed to understand the situation fully before acting. He decided to spend the day researching. He pulled out old property deeds, county records, and maps of the land. He wanted to know exactly who owned the road, who had the right to place signs, and what the law actually said. Hours passed as he traced back property boundaries and easements. He made notes and highlighted sections that clearly supported his ownership and access rights. While he was deep in research, he couldn't ignore the emotional impact of what was happening. The ranch, which had been his sanctuary, now felt under siege. He remembered why he had bought it in the first place: the freedom, the quiet, the life on his own terms. The thought that someone could try to take that away, even indirectly, stung deeply. It wasn't just a matter of land or money. It was about principle, about being allowed to live without constant interference. He felt a mix of determination and unease. Determination because he knew he had rights and could fight for them. Unease because the people behind these notices had power in numbers. Sometimes bureaucracy can feel unstoppable. In the following days, he noticed subtle changes around the ranch. Delivery trucks hesitated at the road, unsure if they were allowed to pass. Friends who had come to visit seemed nervous about getting stuck in some kind of dispute. The small sense of community he had felt in the area began to feel fragile. And yet, he refused to be intimidated. He continued his work repairing fences, feeding animals, and tending to the fields. Every task he completed felt like a small act of defiance, a reminder that he was not going to let a few signs and letters dictate his life. One afternoon, a neighbor approached him cautiously. She had lived in the area for decades and had seen the HOA grow in power over the years. She warned him that once they set their sights on someone, they could be relentless. She described stories of neighbors who had been fined for trivial things, had gates removed, or were forced to remove perfectly legal structures. He listened politely, thanking her for the advice, but inside he felt a spark of resolve. He realized that the situation was not just about him. It was about setting a precedent, about standing up for his rights and showing that the rules didn't apply arbitrarily. He started keeping a detailed log of every interaction, every notice, and every sign posted. Photos, copies of letters, and notes about conversations went into a binder that he carried everywhere on the ranch. He didn't know exactly how this would play out, but he wanted a record in case the situation escalated. It was a small comfort to know that he was prepared and that the facts were on his side. As the weeks passed, the tension continued. Every trip to the main gate was a reminder of the battle that had quietly begun. Every letter in the mailbox carried the potential for conflict. But at the same time, the ranch itself became even more of a refuge. He found solace in routine, in the rhythm of farm work, and in the quiet beauty of his surroundings. The creek still flowed, the chickens still clucked, and the goats played in the fields. Nature didn't take sides, and for now, it offered a sense of stability. One morning, as he walked along the fence line inspecting the posts he had repaired the day before, he stopped and looked at the horizon. The sun was rising, painting the sky with colors that seemed too vivid to be real. He felt a mixture of exhaustion and anticipation. He knew this was just the beginning. The HOA had made the first move, but he was ready to respond calmly, strategically, and legally. He didn't need to yell, threaten, or act rashly. He just needed to be patient and clever. In the quiet moments, he thought about his life before the ranch. The crowded streets, the constant noise, the feeling of being watched and judged. None of that mattered here anymore. The ranch represented freedom, self-reliance, and dignity. And even though outsiders were trying to impose rules that didn't belong to them, he knew that the land and the law were his allies. By the end of the first month, the situation had settled into a tense routine. The HOA had not taken any drastic action, but the presence of the signs and notices hung over him like a shadow. Each day he walked the property, tended to the animals, and prepared for the inevitable next step. He was determined to live his life without surrendering to unreasonable demands. The ranch was more than land. It was a statement of independence, testament to patience, perseverance, and quiet strength. He didn't know what would happen next. Would the HOA escalate? Would they try to block him physically or financially? Those questions lingered, but he refused to be paralyzed by them. Instead, he focused on the tangible, the fences, the barn, the creek, the animals, and the sunrise. Every small victory, every repair completed, every animal fed felt like a step toward reclaiming control over his life. He reminded himself daily that patience, preparation, and knowledge were more powerful than fear or intimidation. And so, life continued on the ranch, marked by quiet defiance and careful observation. He woke with purpose, worked with determination, and rested with satisfaction. The letters, the notices, and the signs were challenges, but not threats. They were reminders that his independence had value, that his efforts were meaningful, and that he had already taken the first steps toward a long and careful victory. He looked at the land with pride, knowing that the fight was only beginning. But confident that he was ready for whatever came next, the tension didn't fade. In fact, it grew stronger with every passing day. The HOA didn't remove their signs, and the letters continued to arrive, now with a sharper tone. They claimed he was violating community standards, ignoring the rights of the residents, and even interfering with the safety of the road. Each letter was more pointed than the last, threatening fines that would add up quickly if he didn't comply. Despite knowing that the land and the access road were legally his, the constant stream of warnings started to feel like pressure designed to wear him down. He had hoped the situation might be resolved with a polite conversation or by simply showing the documents proving his ownership. But when he reached out to the HOA office to explain his side, he was met with resistance. The staff on the phone were polite but unhelpful, insisting he needed to follow rules that didn't exist for his property. He scheduled a meeting with the board, hoping that face-to-face communication would bring clarity. Instead, he found himself in a room with several board members who seemed eager to intimidate. The meeting began with the usual formalities, but it quickly became tense. The board members took turns listing complaints. From the animals he kept to the way he had arranged the fencing, to the color of the barn roof. None of these things were illegal or outside county codes, but they presented them as violations. One of the members even laughed when he mentioned that the road access was legally his. They treated him as though he was naive or uninformed, assuming that he would be scared into compliance. Their tone was condescending, their words precise, meant to create doubt and pressure. He listened quietly, taking notes. There was no need to argue in the moment. Every word they said, every claim they made, would later be useful in documenting their approach. He realized that responding emotionally would only play into their hands. Instead, he focused on observing their behavior, noting the contradictions in their statements, and planning his next steps carefully. He understood that patience and careful record-keeping could be more powerful than confrontation. After the meeting, he felt a mix of frustration and determination. The situation was clearly escalating, and he knew that the HOA would continue to push. He began spending more time researching local ordinances and state laws. He found that the road had been designated as an easement for the property when it was first established decades ago. He also discovered that his property lines were clearly documented in county records. With this knowledge, he felt a renewed sense of confidence. He wasn't powerless, and he had legal support on his side. Despite the growing tension, life on the ranch continued. He maintained his routine, caring for animals, repairing fences, and improving the property. Each day, he worked with focus and purpose. He found solace in the rhythm of farm life, knowing that the work itself was grounding and gave him strength. While the HOA tried to create stress, he refused to let it disrupt the life he had built. He realized that maintaining normalcy was part of his strategy. If he allowed fear or frustration to dominate, the HOA would feel victorious. The intimidation wasn't limited to letters and meetings. One day, he noticed a group of HOA members driving slowly past the entrance, peering over the fences and whispering among themselves. It felt like surveillance, a way to assert presence and remind him that they were watching. He observed them calmly, making mental notes of the vehicles, the faces, and the frequency of these visits. Though the actions were unsettling, he refused to react impulsively. Documenting every instance became a habit, a protective measure for the future. As the weeks went on, he started to see the human side of the conflict. The HOA members were not just abstract opponents. They were people with their own fears, biases, and need for control. Understanding this helped him approach the situation more strategically. He began thinking about how to assert his rights without inflaming the tension unnecessarily. Each decision was carefully considered, where to place fences, how to move equipment, and how to maintain the land in full compliance with legal standards while subtly demonstrating his independence. One morning, while repairing a section of fencing along the creek, he overheard neighbors talking. They expressed concern about the HOA's growing influence, sharing stories of people who had been fined or forced to remove structures from their property. It was clear that the HOA's reputation for strict enforcement created fear in the community. Hearing this, he felt a mix of empathy and resolve. He wasn't just fighting for himself. He was setting an example. Standing firm could help others feel empowered to know their own rights. Legal consultations became a part of his routine. He met with a local attorney who specialized in property disputes and easements. They reviewed all documents, including the original land deeds, maps, and the HOA's correspondence. The attorney confirmed what he already suspected. The HOA had no legal authority over his ranch. He left these meetings with renewed confidence and a clear plan. He didn't need to escalate through anger or confrontation. The law was on his side, and careful preparation would ensure that his rights were respected. The emotional side of the battle was challenging, though every notice and every sign felt like a small attack. The constant presence of the HOA's authority, even if illegitimate, created tension that was hard to shake. He relied on the simple, grounding routines of ranch life to maintain balance. Early mornings feeding animals, afternoons repairing fences, and evenings watching the sunset helped him stay centered. These routines reminded him why he had invested in the ranch in the first place, to live a life free from constant external pressure. During this period, he also began building a stronger connection with the land itself. He walked the boundaries daily, inspecting fences, observing wildlife, and noting changes in the terrain. This physical presence was more than maintenance. It was a way to assert his ownership and care for the property. Every task, from mending a broken gate to clearing debris, became a statement of resilience and independence. The land responded to his attention, flourishing under his care, which gave him both pride and confidence. As the confrontation with the HOA continued, he realized that controlling his own reactions was just as important as controlling the property. He practiced patience, choosing when to speak, when to act, and when to observe quietly. This mindset prevented him from making mistakes that could have been used against him. It also allowed him to see opportunities that others might miss, ways to assert his rights subtly without creating unnecessary conflict. One afternoon, a particularly aggressive letter arrived, claiming he had violated several HOA rules and demanding immediate compliance or face escalating fines. He calmly opened the letter, read every word, and filed it in his binder. He then spent the rest of the day cross-referencing the claims with county codes and property deeds. Every claim was clearly unfounded, and he made notes for potential legal use. His calm and methodical response contrasted sharply with the aggressive tone of the letter, giving him an internal sense of victory. The conflict also highlighted the importance of community relationships. Though he maintained distance from the HOA members themselves, he nurtured friendships with neighbors who shared his values or who were sympathetic to his situation. Conversations over fences, brief chats during deliveries, casual encounters became opportunities to share experiences and gather informal support. These connections provided reassurance that he wasn't isolated and that others respected the fairness of his position. By the end of the second month, the HOA's attempts to intimidate seemed to have an unexpected side effect. Their constant presence, letters, and scrutiny made him more diligent, more observant, and more prepared. Every interaction became an opportunity to reinforce his knowledge of the law, his understanding of the land, and his mental resilience. What was meant to unsettle him instead strengthened his determination. The ranch, once a quiet refuge, had become a place of quiet defiance and careful strategy. Despite the stress, he never lost sight of why he was there. He continued to wake early, work the land, care for the animals, and take in the beauty of the landscape. The creek still ran clear, the fields remained lush, and the sky offered moments of awe that reminded him that this was his life, his choice, and his victory in progress. The letters and threats were just noise compared to the satisfaction of seeing a fence repaired, a gate secured, or animals thriving. In these moments, he also reflected on the human nature behind the HOA's actions. He recognized the fear of losing control, the desire to enforce conformity, and the tendency to overlook fairness in favor of power. Understanding this gave him an advantage. He could anticipate their moves, remain calm under pressure, and respond strategically rather than emotionally. It became clear that the battle wasn't just about land. It was about asserting independence in the face of authority that believed it could dominate. The second part of the conflict ended not with a resolution, but with a deepening sense of clarity. He knew the HOA would continue to challenge him, that more letters and meetings were inevitable. But he also knew he was prepared. His legal knowledge was solid, his records meticulous, and his understanding of the land undeniable. He had transformed from a simple ranch owner into a careful strategist, ready to face whatever the HOA might throw at him next. And all the while, the ranch remained a sanctuary, a testament to perseverance, patience, and the quiet power of standing firm. By maintaining focus, documenting everything, and staying connected to the land and community, he had turned a situation designed to intimidate him into an opportunity to grow stronger, smarter, and more resilient. Every notice and every visit from the HOA only reinforced the importance of preparation, observation, and self-control. He had learned that true strength wasn't in confrontation, but in knowing your rights, standing firm, and letting the facts speak for themselves. The stage was now set for the spent days poring over county maps, property deeds, and legal documents. The more he looked, the clearer it became that the road leading to his ranch was entirely his by law. It's an easement that granted full access to his property. The HOA might try to impose rules or intimidate, but the law was unequivocal. This realization sparked a sense of empowerment. He wasn't powerless. He had the knowledge, the documentation, and the determination to protect his ranch. He decided to approach the situation differently. Instead of confronting the HOA aggressively, he would act strategically. The first step was to make his presence undeniable, yet fully legal. He began by reinforcing the fences along the road, making sure each post was secure and clearly marked with property lines. He installed simple but sturdy signs that indicated the land and the easement were private property. Each sign was factual, calm, and legally correct, leaving no room for misinterpretation. Next, he focused on enhancing the ranch itself. He built a few small structures that were allowed under county regulations, such as animal shelters and equipment storage areas. He organized livestock paths and added a few gates that helped manage the animals without restricting access. Every action he took was within legal boundaries, yet it subtly demonstrated his control and ownership. It wasn't about antagonizing the HOA, but about asserting his rights in a visible and practical way. He also realized that the road itself could be used to his advantage. The terrain was uneven, and with careful planning, could introduce small legal obstacles that slowed down traffic without violating any laws. He placed signs alerting drivers to livestock crossings and uneven surfaces. Equipment occasionally moved across the road as part of daily ranch work. All of it was completely legal, but it forced those passing by, including HOA members, to pay attention and proceed with care. Each pass reminded them that they were entering a working ranch and that the property was under careful supervision. During this time, he strengthened his legal preparation. He met again with the attorney, reviewing every letter from the HOA, the signage he planned to install, and the work he was doing on the land. They confirmed that every action he took was fully compliant. The attorney advised documenting each activity, photographing signs, livestock, and maintenance work. This meticulous record-keeping would provide proof of legality if the HOA attempted any enforcement action. With every page added to the binder, he felt more secure, knowing that he could respond quickly and confidently if challenged. He also started observing the HOA more closely. Each vehicle that drove by, each glance from a board member, was noted. He recorded the times, dates, and behavior, keeping a detailed log. This wasn't about paranoia. It was about preparation. By understanding the patterns of the HOA members, he could anticipate their moves and adjust his approach accordingly. He noticed which members were more aggressive and which were cautious. He even recognized the subtle tension among them, likely because they had underestimated his knowledge and resolve. While all this planning and observation was going on, life on the ranch remained grounded in routine. He fed the animals, repaired fences, and maintained the property with care. Every task was a reminder that he was in control. The animals thrived, the fields looked healthy, and the structures stood strong. These tangible results gave him confidence and a sense of satisfaction. They also served as proof to anyone watching that the ranch was properly managed and maintained, leaving no room for legitimate complaints. One morning, as he installed a new sign along the entrance, he noticed a couple of HOA members approaching. Instead of panicking or rushing, he continued his work calmly. The members slowed as they read the signs and observed the activity. They exchanged whispered comments but didn't confront him directly. He stayed polite, professional, and steady, nodding briefly in acknowledgement. His calm demeanor and clear demonstration of lawful activity left them unsure of how to respond. That moment made him realize that strategy and composure could have a more powerful impact than confrontation or anger. He also considered the perspective of the other residents. The HOA's rules and threats had created tension and anxiety in the neighborhood. By maintaining a visible, law-abiding presence, he began to show that the HOA's power had limits. He wasn't just protecting his own ranch. He was setting an example for others who might feel intimidated. His careful, steady approach demonstrated that it was possible to stand firm without breaking the law or resorting to aggression. The legal and strategic preparation extended to the animals as well. He organized livestock paths so that animals would cross certain points of the road naturally and safely. Each crossing was indicated with clear signs and careful timing, ensuring that any vehicles passing by had to slow down. These minor adjustments were fully compliant with county regulations but created a subtle reminder that the ranch was active and under careful management. Every pass by the HOA members became an unspoken lesson in responsibility and ownership. At the same time, continued to document everything. Photos of signs, equipment, livestock, daily activities filled the binder alongside the letters from the HOA and the legal documents confirming his rights. This comprehensive record was both a shield and a statement. He was organized, lawful, and prepared. Each entry reinforced the fact that his approach was methodical and deliberate. If the HOA tried to take action, he would have the evidence to show that he was fully compliant and that their complaints were without merit while executing his plan. He understood that immediate results weren't necessary. The HOA might continue to attempt intimidation, but he knew that time was on his side. Every day that passed without escalation reinforced his confidence and allowed him to fine-tune his approach. The slow, steady method ensured that he retained control while avoiding unnecessary conflict. He also engaged more with neighbors, who were sympathetic or curious about the situation. He shared general information about property rights, easements, and the importance of understanding one's legal standing. These conversations were not confrontational, but informative, helping others recognize that knowledge and preparation were key. He didn't need to win over the HOA. He needed to assert his rights and maintain clarity in the community. As the weeks went on, the subtle strategy began to show results. The HOA's attempts to intimidate became less frequent. Notices still arrived, but the tone seemed less threatening, likely because they recognized that he was well-informed and well-prepared. The traffic along the road slowed naturally due to the livestock crossings and the careful signage. Each visit from HOA members became a reminder of his preparation and the law that supported him. He didn't have to escalate. The situation shifted because he was methodical and confident. Despite the progress, he remained vigilant. He continued to observe the behavior of HOA members, record each interaction, and maintain his documentation. The ranch continued to thrive, reflecting his hard work, careful planning, and dedication. He also found moments of peace and satisfaction in the small joys of ranch life, the sound of animals, the sight of the sunrise, and the quiet strength of the land he had worked so hard to claim. One day, as he repaired a fence near the entrance, a delivery driver paused to ask directions. The driver commented on how well maintained the property was and how clearly everything was organized. He smiled and gave directions, noticing how even casual visitors were influenced by the visible care and management of the ranch. The subtle message was clear: the property was under competent and lawful control. Every passerby, whether neighbor, visitor, or HOA member, could see the evidence of diligence and responsibility. By the end of this period, he felt a growing sense of empowerment. He wasn't just reacting, he was acting strategically. Each fence post, each sign, each organized livestock path was part of a larger plan. The law, preparation, and patience had become his allies, transforming the ranch from a place of potential conflict into a stage for quiet but undeniable assertion of rights. The subtle, legal measures he had implemented were already having an effect. The HOA's power over him was diminishing, not because of confrontation, but because of his calm, methodical, and fully lawful approach. He reflected on the journey so far. What had begun as a peaceful purchase had turned into a complex dance of rights, strategy, and resilience. He understood that the conflict wasn't about personal animosity. It was about boundaries, control, and the assertion of legal authority. By responding thoughtfully and strategically, he had taken control of the situation without resorting to anger or rash decisions. The ranch, the animals, and the land itself had become instruments of a quiet, measured assertion of independence. As the days turned into weeks, he continued his work, keeping the routine and the strategy in balance. The signs remained, the livestock paths continued, and the documentation grew more thorough. Each day, the HOA members who passed the ranch were reminded that the property was carefully managed and that the owner was fully aware of his rights. Every detail, from fence repairs to equipment placement, reinforced the message without a single word of confrontation. The strategy was working, and the ranch had become a testament to patience, preparation, and subtle power. He knew the battle wasn't over, but he also knew that he had shifted the momentum. The HOA could try to continue intimidation, but he was ready. Every action taken from this point forward would be deliberate, lawful, and strategic. The ranch wasn't just land anymore. It was a symbol of resilience, knowledge, and the quiet, unstoppable power of preparation. The stage was now set for the next phase, where patience and strategy would begin to translate into tangible victories. Further reinforcing the independence and authority he had fought to secure, the changes he had made on the ranch began to show results in subtle but undeniable ways. The signs, the organized livestock paths, and the careful placement of gates had created a natural rhythm that made it clear the property was under active, lawful management. Every vehicle that passed through, whether it was a neighbor, delivery driver, or HOA member, had to slow down, notice, and navigate the property with care. It wasn't about confrontation, it was about demonstrating control through action. At first, the HOA members seemed impatient. They drove past the ranch quickly, complaining about delays and obstacles. But over time, it became clear that the constant visibility of the ranch's order, the livestock, and the maintained land left a lasting impression. People noticed that the property was well managed, thriving, and fully compliant with legal requirements. There was no way to challenge it without exposing themselves to scrutiny and embarrassment. The power dynamic was beginning to shift. Neighbors began to observe the situation as well. They had seen the early conflicts and understood the pressure the HOA could apply. But as they noticed the ranch owner's calm demeanor, the meticulous maintenance, and the visible evidence of lawful ownership, some felt inspired. Quietly, they realized that compliance with every arbitrary rule wasn't necessary when one understood the law and acted within it. Some neighbors even offered small gestures of support, like sharing advice on local regulations or simply acknowledging the ranch owner with nods and smiles as they passed. The rancher continued to document everything carefully. Photos of animals grazing, gates being moved, fences being repaired, and signs posted all added to the growing record. He kept copies of every letter, email, and conversation with the HOA. This meticulous documentation reinforced his legal standing and also gave him a psychological advantage. Every step he took reminded him that he was prepared and knowledgeable, that the HOA's intimidation was losing effectiveness. Daily life on the ranch became a dance of routine and strategy. Mornings were spent feeding animals and inspecting the property. Afternoons were for repairs, maintenance, and thoughtful adjustments to improve both the safety and appearance of the land. Evenings were moments of reflection, where he reviewed records, updated logs, and planned next steps. The structure and rhythm of these tasks became a shield against stress. Each completed task felt like a small victory and a reaffirmation of his independence. One afternoon, a group of HOA members approached the entrance in their vehicles, slowing as they passed through the ranch. They exchanged quiet, tense words with each other as they navigated the signs and livestock crossings. He remained calm, moving around the property, adjusting equipment, and feeding animals. They couldn't find a reason to stop him or challenge his activity, and the subtle tension in their expressions was evident. The realization that he was fully prepared and acting lawfully seemed to unsettle them more than anything he could have said or done with each encounter. The rancher's strategy became more effective. He realized that the HOA's attempts to assert control were weakened by their lack of legal standing and by his consistent, visible management of the land. The more they tried to impose rules or monitor his actions, the more apparent it became that they were powerless to enforce anything. The signs, gates, and livestock paths were not obstacles in themselves, but visible reminders that he was acting within his rights. The property spoke for itself. During this time, he also strengthened his community presence in small ways. Friendly gestures, casual conversations with neighbors, and open communication about his property's lawful management created quiet goodwill. People began to see that he wasn't seeking conflict. He was asserting rights and responsibilities clearly and calmly. This subtle influence helped shift perceptions, making the HOA's threats seem less credible and more like overreach. The strategic placement of livestock crossings proved especially effective. Every day, animals moved across the road in controlled patterns, requiring drivers to slow down and pay attention. The movements were natural, fully legal, and necessary for ranch operations. But they also reinforced the presence and activity of the property. HOA members passing by multiple times each week were constantly reminded of the ranch's independent operation. It wasn't punitive. It was a consistent demonstration of lawful authority. Legal preparation remained a key focus. He reviewed and updated documentation regularly, photographing fences, gates, animals, and signs. Copies of HOA letters and emails were kept alongside property deeds and county maps. Each entry reinforced the fact that he was fully compliant and organized. In case the HOA attempted escalation, he would have a complete record to demonstrate the legality of every action and the unfounded nature of their complaints. As the weeks turned into months, the impact of his approach became clear. HOA members became more hesitant, less vocal, and noticeably cautious when passing the ranch. Complaints dropped, and letters became fewer. Even when they attempted to assert authority verbally or in writing, the calm, documented evidence of lawful management rendered their attempts ineffective. It was a slow, subtle reversal of influence, where preparation and consistency had begun to outweigh intimidation. The ranch itself thrived during this period. Animals grew healthy, fences remained sturdy, and the property looked well cared for. He felt a growing sense of satisfaction and accomplishment. The physical evidence of hard work and lawful management reinforced his confidence and provided a tangible demonstration of his independence. The land had become not just a place to live, but a symbol of resilience and patience. One evening, after a long day of maintenance and observation, he stood at the porch, watching the sun set over the fields. The peace and beauty of the ranch contrasted sharply with the earlier tension of HOA letters and threats. He reflected on how patience, preparation, and strategic action had shifted the balance of power. The HOA's presence, which once felt intimidating, is now something he could observe calmly, knowing that their influence was diminishing. Every day brought a quiet sense of victory. The subtle, consistent measures he had taken were now part of daily life. Livestock moved in organized paths, signs marked property boundaries, and gates were adjusted for lawful access. Each detail reinforced the message: the ranch was fully under his control and operated within the law. HOA members could no longer challenge the activity without exposing their own overreach. Their authority, once assumed, was now clearly limited. Neighbors continued to observe and sometimes comment. Some expressed quiet admiration, noting the calm confidence and meticulous care evident on the property. The rancher's approach had created a ripple effect, showing that knowledge, preparation, and patience could overcome attempts at intimidation. It wasn't about confrontation or conflict. It was about demonstrating competence, lawful action, and consistency. The results were visible and undeniable. Even casual visitors, like delivery drivers or service personnel, noticed the organization and careful management of the property. They navigated the road with care, acknowledging the presence of signs, gates, and animals. Each encounter reinforced the rancher's sense of control and the effectiveness of the subtle strategy he had implemented. The property itself became a communication tool, conveying the message that the land was lawful, managed, and independent. Despite the growing success, he remained vigilant. He continued to monitor the behavior of HOA members, document activities, and maintain careful records. Patience remained essential, as the HOA might still attempt new tactics. But by maintaining composure, acting lawfully, and demonstrating consistent management, he had already shifted the dynamic in his favor. The quiet, consistent approach had turned the tables, showing that intimidation could be met with calm, strategic action. By the end of this period, the rancher could see the results of his efforts clearly. HOA members were less assertive, complaints had decreased, and his presence on the land was respected, even if begrudgingly. The ranch operated smoothly, with daily tasks and routine activities reinforcing the authority and control he had established. Each day brought a small victory, a confirmation that patience, preparation, and lawful action were more powerful than confrontation or aggression. He reflected on how much had changed. What had begun as a threat now seemed like an opportunity to assert independence and demonstrate resilience. The HOA's power, once seemingly overwhelming, diminished through careful strategy, preparation, and consistent lawful action. The ranch was not just a home. It was a symbol of perseverance, quiet strength, and the effectiveness of patience and planning. As the sun set on another day, he walked along the fence line, checking the gates and signs, observing the animals and noting the progress made. The quiet of the land, the well-being of the animals, and the smooth operation of the ranch brought a deep sense of satisfaction. The challenges posed by the HOA had become opportunities to demonstrate control, knowledge, and resilience. Each step, each adjustment, each observation contributed to a growing sense of empowerment. The quiet victories accumulated, and he knew that the next steps would build on this foundation. The HOA could no longer intimidate him with letters or visits, and their attempts to assert authority had lost much of their effect. The ranch was fully operational, legally protected, a visible testament to patience, preparation, and strategic action. Each day reinforced the understanding that true power came from knowledge, careful planning, and consistent, lawful execution. In this period of subtle dominance, he realized that the ranch was not only a place of independence, but also a statement to the community and the HOA alike. By acting with calm determination, he had shifted the balance of influence, showing that intimidation could be met with preparation and patience. The ranch had become a symbol of resilience, a carefully maintained space where lawful authority and strategic action